Welcome to Engineering Scale Models. I am Jason, your host, and today the screen looks weird because we're going to be talking about something that is a little bit different, but it's hobby related. It's about making a mold box for casting parts. In a previous video, it was pretty long, and I didn't go into great detail on how I constructed my mold boxes, but this was one of them. It was to make a press mold like this for a shoulder pad, for a Space Marine shoulder pad, and out of green stuff, and here's what it looks like. And I made this mold, and I made two mold boxes. I made a mold box for part A, the first half of the mold, and I made a mold box for the second half. And then in order to produce the parts, I made this box serves as the box for making the second part of the mold and also casting the parts. So I made these two mold boxes, and I want to show you how I do that because I didn't go into great detail, because I talked about putting keys in a mold box and putting holes in the mold box, and I did that on camera, but I didn't talk about the actual construction of the mold box and what I did through that. And I'm going to also talk about different options for mold box keys and things like that. So if you are going to make a mold box, you have a couple of materials. This is my box of scrap styrene here. I have Evergreen Styrene has these bags called odds and ends, and you get them at the hobby store. I pick one up every time I go to the hobby store, which is not as much as I would like to. I pick up one of these bags of odds and ends. It comes with some clear, it comes with some colored acrylic. It's super thin though. It comes with just different patterns and just all kinds of different sizes and shapes of styrene. It comes with some round stuff, it comes with some tubes, and it just comes with pieces. And I store all mine in this box, and then I can grab out what I need when I need it. So, but for making a mold box, and I'll show you with the mold box that I have here, I used 2mm thick on the bottom for the base, and then I used 1.5mm for the sides, and I glued it up, overlapping one side as I went around, and I put keys in it, and I drilled some holes in the bottom of it, and then so the holes wouldn't be blocked up when it was on the ground, I put some Plastistruck strip, square stock strip or rectangular stock strip on the bottom, sanded it all up. It's got a nice finish. I think I put 400 grit on it, so it's smooth, rounded the corners, took all the sharpness off, so it is easy to handle and push in the silicone, and it won't bind up or anything on the silicone. Now, I went into a great bit of detail on this mold to build it. I spent probably a couple hours building this because I wanted a mold I could use over and over again, that I could just keep putting a new shoulder pad in, making another mold, and then I could have a mold for each shoulder pad in the Death Watch shoulder pad pack, so I just have a mold for each one. Now, what I used to do this was basically the styrene, glued it together, and made sure there was no undercuts. I made sure everything was square, and I did that with these angle blocks, and also 1, 2, 3 blocks, gluing it together so that it was perfectly 90 degrees and all squared up. And then any gaps that might have occurred, I filled with Sprue Goo, and then I made sure I scraped them square so there wasn't any way for the silicone to run down or drip in or anything like that. Now, what I'm going to show you today is making this type of mold box, but making it for pourable silicone, or you can use this stuff. This is blue stuff. You heat this up in hot water and it turns gooey. I also have some stuff called composite mold that you heat up and it's pourable. Well, with the holes in the bottom of this, it's not going to be pourable, so this is just going to be for putties. And I'm going to show you a different way to make keys with wax, and also working with some wax to make your part you're actually molding to actually modify it. You can modify it with some wax and be able to cast it. So in order to do this, we need some tools. First, we have my bin of plastic scraps. I have a X-Acto knife with a 10A blade. Be advised they can break, so be careful, wear glasses. I have a pair of dirt cheap calipers I hate. They are accurate enough for my use, but I'm used to a Brown & Sharp or Michitoyo caliper. I got a pencil, and then I have two scribing tools. I have a trumpeter scribing tool, and I have Tamiya's scribing tool. It makes cutting through the plastic easier. It's easier than a razor or X-Acto knife. I have two different size rulers, a 6-inch and an 8-inch ruler. Instead, I have my squares. I have an additional cutting mat that I use for the scribe tools because it pretty much tears up the cutting mat pretty bad. So keep that advised. I have some jeweler's wax wires. They're ready-made wax shapes. I'll show you what they are in this box here. If you look, this is a wax shape. This is a pear-shaped one. This would be great for making a key or a sprue if you're going to be doing a pour casting. But there is a wide range of sizes. So they got half round, pear-shaped, and round if you need that. They're very cheap. I recommend, if you live in Florida and they're shipped through your post office, get them out of the post office and let them sit in a cool environment for about 24 hours. Otherwise, they're going to be gummy and be sticking together, so be advised of that. And then also, I have my bin of wax, carvable wax, moldable wax, meltable wax, sticky wax. I use some different dental stuff, cervical wax and sculpting wax. And then I bought a kit of variety wax pieces. This is Ferris Filet wax. Just tons of different wax shapes. You can cut them out and make, you can actually carve yourself apart. There's some wax carving tools that you can get, and I'll show you another video on carving wax into stuff to make a mold of. Excuse me. So the last thing I have is a different type of molding wall, and this is basically plexiglass. It's thin acrylic sheet. This is, I believe, 3/32. It's about 9 millimeters thick. It's not right. It's 1 millimeter thick. That's why I hate this calipers. So this is used for making picture frames. It's got a protective film on it, but pourable silicones and putty silicones and epoxy resins and things do not like to stick to this clear plexiglass stuff, so you can cut this into mold shapes, and you can actually tape them together with Scotch tape and then hot glue them, and you can just cut the glue and the tape and peel them apart. They make a great temporary mold, and the amount of these sheets you can get for $4.99 is insane. I got this stack here. It is 8 by 10. It is 20 sheets. It was $4.99. You can also get it in 5 by 7 sheets. Like I said, they're for the Cricut machine or glass picture frames, but they work fantastic for making molds. It's cheap. It's good stuff, and it cuts pretty easy. It cuts just like styrene. Just make sure you have a straight line, a very sharp knife, and you can score it, and then you can pop it off. But like I said, you can tape this stuff together with Scotch tape and make a mold pretty quickly, and you can glue it down with hot glue, and you will be good to go. Next thing is a hot glue gun. I don't have mine out because I forgot about it. So a hot glue gun would be good to do. I use one with a mini sticks, high temp. You can use a low temp. Low temp might give you a little bit better to not melt things. So especially if you're using wax and things like that. Now when it comes to working with the wax, I use this Max Wax cheapy little tip thing. You press the button and the tip gets red hot in a couple seconds, and it melts the wax pretty well. But I would also recommend some wax tools, like sculpting tools that you can heat up. Like I have one here. Like when I need to place all the tools, the wax down, I will take. I have this little scoop here. This is a Tamiya stirring stick. This I can scoop the wax out, heat this spoon up with a torch or a lighter, and I can spread the wax down, stick my part down, and I can also do some shaping if I heat up this end here. Don't heat it up too much because it is thin and it will get hot and burn you, but that is another good tool. So I also recommend, if you're going to be working with the wax, you can get one of these teeny tiny cheap inexpensive jewelry saws that seems to work. So you have to cut the blades you get, but like I said, these jewelry saws are cheap. So it's just a matter of putting the blade in here. Well, we'll put that back in later. But it's just got fine teeth. I used this for many years to cut up Space Marine bodies for Warhammer 40,000. Worked great for that. A wax file would be good. I ordered one, but it's taking forever to get here in the mid of our problem. You can also use various different scrapers to trim your parts and things like that. But working with styrene is basically the same as working with any kind of product. Now when it comes to making your mold box, I would take your part you want to mold. So let me show you here. Let me grab the part I want to mold. So I have this shoulder pad, for example. Now this is my shoulder pad. It is about 10 millimeters by about 9 millimeters. So we'll say it's 10 by 10 square. So what I do is I like to raise that off of the bottom of the first mold with a wax block, and I do that so I have a good I have a unique seam line that works out pretty well. Let me show you here. See how I have this square part here, and when this pushes together, the excess green stuff squeezes out in this void, and it gives me a great seam line there that is easy just to place it flat on a cutting mat and trim that off. So I'll show you here. It gives me the seam line right along this back edge, and I can just sand this and and just clean that up with some sanding once it's fully cured. I pulled it from the mold about 8-9 hours later, still not fully cured, and my green stuff is a little old, about 2 years old, so I do keep it in the freezer, but I think it's about gone off, and I need to swap it for another one that I have that I got recently. Plus, it was in the tape form, and I'm not a fan of that. So, like I said, we'll say the space of this is 9 by 9, 10 by 10 millimeters. So I want to put it on a block, and the block I chose was 13 by hopefully 13. Yeah, 13 by 13 millimeters. So that gives me about 1.5 millimeters all the way around this shoulder pad here, and that is what I wanted in the center of my mold box. Now we're gonna lay this. We'll use this cutting mat as an example, and we'll put this here. We'll say this is going to be the center of our mold, and it has our shoulder pad on there. And I would heat up the wax to stick that shoulder pad down in the center. Try to get it perfectly centered there. And we'll say that this is our mold here. Now, in addition to building the bottom mold box, you can do this. This will key together with this wax block square, but it's nice to have a key in the other half of the mold, like these keys here. So in order to do that, I cut some triangular styrene stock and glued it down to the bottom of the mold like this. But if you want a quicker, more temporary solution, you could take the wax wires here, and then this is a 6-gauge half round. I'll show you this here. And we want this to be double the length of our main form. So our main form was 13, so we want this 26. So we'll go to 26 here. We'll make a mark. And I'll cut that off right there. We might trim this down just a little bit more. Cut this one a little long. And you can save this wax and melt it, use it for melting down. And then what we're going to do is we're going to want to put these right down there like that to make our keys. And you want enough space in between. So you see I'm using these lines, these centimeter lines on the thing. So far my mold is 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters, but I'm in the key spot. So what I would make it is, I would make it this section here. I would go this to this, and then I would come in here like this. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 centimeters. So it would be 5 centimeters by 3 centimeters. Now, after I would line that up on like a cutting mat or measure it out with a ruler, I like that. I like those dimensions. It's a little bit longer than the box that I made. I made this box at 4 centimeters. And it seemed to work, but I was a little tight around some of the edges. It's right at 3 centimeters. A little under. So I think this will be a good size box. So we come over to our piece of 2mm styrene here, and we will find our square edge. So this is square to this edge. So if I measure off of, measure 3 centimeters, on this here, and I come up and I'll use my straight edge to make that a square cut, and then I'll take my scribing tool and I will scribe it. Scribe it handheld like this for right now. Make sure your fingers aren't in the way so you don't jagged cut yourself. Now what I'll do is I will take this and I will make this side square the length of it, and I wanted 5 centimeters, so let's mark out 5 centimeters here. Mark out 5 centimeters, I'll come in here, draw my line. Now I can scribe this and it's going to fall in that groove of the one I've already made. And I'm just going to scribe it so I have a nice line to follow. Then I'm going to come in, and now I like to mark it with that one, and then I like to come back with my Tamiya scribing tool because it seems to take bigger cuts. And I will cut this out. As you can see, I'm digging into my little sacrificial mat here, so I'm not ruining my larger mat. And just score it. You have to score it a little bit more than you would normally, because you want a fairly square end, and normally when you snap thicker stuff, the end isn't as square as you would like it. You can square that up with sanding it, but I like to minimize that stuff, so now I'm just gonna break that off. So now I have my bottom plate of my mold like that, and then I'll show you how my pieces will go back on there. Like that. Now that is basically how I plan on doing that. Now, that's going to be a little bit bigger. I made this mold a little bit more economic, but I'm going to show you with this one how you can use a reusable molding product. That's what this mold's going to be for. This blue stuff, Imagu, or whatever it's called. You heat it up in hot water. So this size of this mold, I'm not going to be wasting anything because the stuff is reusable. So it's a little bit bigger, that's fine, and I think it will work out. So now we got that. I'm going to take the burrs off of this piece here. Just like so. I want pieces to butt up against this. You can use a sanding tool to do this, or you can scrape it. What I find great for roughing in this stuff here is one of these Infini Model zebra sanding sticks, the 100 grit, just for, you know, a little bit of. The 100 grit tears through it pretty good, gives you a nice gluing surface. So, and if you're using a pourable silicone and you want to reuse your model, like what I did here, I cut an angle on the bottom plate so that I can cut this mold apart. I glued just a little bit of glue so I can actually put my scribe tool in there, and I can scribe this, and I can cut it with the blade and cut through the glue line and actually pop this mold apart to get out a pourable silicone if it's a little tough to get out. But if you mold release it, you shouldn't have that problem, but you can make it that way so that you can get it out. But with the way I made this perfectly square, I'm able to pop out the silicone, or as long as there's a little bit of flex in the mold. Now, we got this is our bottom, and on this side I'm going to write bottom, so I know the bottom of it. Okay, so now how high do we want our mold? So I made a pretty thick mold here. This is a pretty thick mold, but how you determine that is you want to put your shoulder pad back on your wax riser, and you want to measure, hopefully with a better pair of calipers than I use. So we are at about 9.5 millimeters. So we'll go 13 millimeters. So how high did I make this one? I made that one 12, so we'll make it 13 millimeters. That way we'll have an overall 26 in the end. So we're going to do 13 millimeters. And then we're going to do that by 13 millimeter, 1.3 cm tall. Oh, this is the length, this is the width, and this is the height. So 1.3 centimeters or 13 millimeters. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our thinner plastic. What did I grab here? What is this? Oh, that's 1.5. So we're going to use this 1.5 here. So let us measure out. Well, we know this is a straight edge here. So we want 26 millimeters, or I'm sorry, 13 millimeters. This is a way of doing this. If you have an exact calculator, it's a little bit easier. You can take this and then you can run that down there like that. You get a little bit of a scribe line. Just like that. Get a little bit of scribe line to see what you need to do. So we got a little bit here. Because I'm coming with a ruler. That didn't make a deep enough line for me. I normally use a pair of dividing calipers for this, but I didn't have a pair on me. With a dividing caliper, you can make it deeper, easier. So I'm going to come in here with my scribe tool. Sure your fingers aren't in the way to bump it off track. And a sacrificial cutting mat on the bottom would be very handy. Now most people would just cut this off any which way, but I'm going to square that up so I have a square piece here. So I'm going to come up here like this. Try to make as many molds out of one scrap piece as possible. So so we got our piece here. Hopefully it's square. It's probably not. Got the edge on it here. So I normally use a pair of dividing calipers to make that line deeper. So it's 13.63 there. That's just a smidge off, like a half a millimeter difference. It'll fly on there for right now. So now we need, we're gonna have to cut another strip of this anyways. So let's mark that out. Another strip here. Do for this is I'm going to mark out this can be a side piece here. This up like this. And you guys can scratch build this any way that you guys see fit. I'm just rushing through this. Normally I would, like I said, normally I would take more time to measure this out more efficiently. But I'm just slapping this together. And like I said, you could just cut out your sides in the clear plexiglass, the 1.5 millimeter plexiglass, and you would have what you need. So now I need this to be, what is the width of this? Is 1.5 millimeters, so I need this to be 1.5 millimeters longer. So I'm going to sit this on this edge like that, take a piece of this, put it up against there, and draw a line right there, and the same length. Remember, if the gaps don't fill up, we're going to fill it with Sprue Goo. I know it's easier just to cut a square piece, but we're moving along here. We can make some minor adjustments if need be. So I'm just going to knock that down with this 100 grit. Okay, there's two sides. Now let's cut our next side here. Now for this, we need this to be 1/2 millimeter longer for this wrapped box technique I'm doing. Okay, so to be honest with you, I just started using a Scribe tool to cut styrene. I've always used an X-Acto knife, or scalpel, I mean. Well, X-Acto than a scalpel. But, man, this Scribe tool makes it so much easier, especially with this thicker stuff. I've heard people do it, and I've seen people do it. I just never... I was like, do I really want to use my Scribe tool for that? And I'm like, well, you know, I don't really scribe that much, so might as well cut up more styrene than I scribe things. So there we go. That's that. That's a hangover. It's all going to hang over there like that. I need one more piece like this size here, and we're just going to cut it out of this one. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. This going here. All right, so we have that. We're going to clean this up. Now, what I like to do to make the mold box is take a steel block that is super flat, and I got my 1, 2, 3 block, so I'm at a right angle here. So I'm at a perfect right angle, and I will put down my base, and I will put one of my pieces there. I will line that up, and I will put a magnet on this piece back there to hold it square, and I will then put a magnet on the bottom piece to hold it in alignment. I will check this joint here. Make sure this joint is square as it can be. Then I'll run me some Tamiya Extra Thin Quick Set. Now, I like to use the Quick Set because it doesn't set up as strong as the regular Tamiya glue. This is a less strong bond, and you would think that's bad, but it's strong enough to press in a putty or this Ugamu wax stuff that you need to set in, that you're going to need to press in there. So I'm going to move that magnet over. I'm going to grab me another one, and I'm going to take this piece here. I'm going to push it. I'll put the magnet on it first, and then I'm going to push this into there like that, so it's nice and square. I'm going to glue this corner here, glue right there. Oh my god, this isn't even on camera. I am so sorry. Wow, this is what I got. Oh man, that was bad of me. I'm sorry. Thought I was maybe zoomed out a little bit more. So there we go. I got those corners glued up there, and I used the 1, 2, 3 blocks to make it perfectly square. And so with that, I could even glue on this other side here. If I move this down, so take my other one. I can actually use that on this side now. So now I have this one to do like so. Put a magnet on it, and we will touch that with some glue, and then we'll have one little corner to clean up before we can put the third piece on. And I like to do these overlapping joints other than a butt joint, because it seems to give me a little bit more rigidity, and it makes me only have to make sure one end is perfectly flat here so I can work on it. So that quick set will set pretty quick. So we can reinforce it with a little bit more glue from the bottom when this is set. So I'm going to pull these magnets off. And these are just, button neodymium magnets that come in a set, and I stick them to a metal stand thing over here. So a little bit of sticking on this side here. Peel that up. Alright, so we have our box this far. Now, what I would recommend you do is reinforce this from the bottom, because you're going to have to put some holes in the bottom of this. Reinforce those corners. Now, to make it easy to still work in here to stick down everything, I'm going to wait to put on this side. So this side would go on like this. I need to clean up this edge here. It's a little ragged. I'm going to wait for it to dry before I do that. But I need to clean up that edge a little bit, and then this piece will go on last. But what I want to do is I want to work on getting my keys and stuff set up. So while that's drying, I'm going to grab me my tweezers here and set my keys in. Now I don't want my keys to go the whole length, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little bit off of the keys. They're about a little over an inch now, and I'm going to make them a little under an inch. Again, you can save that wax. And I'm going to make this one the same length. Try to clean some of it off. And then this is the wax method of making keys. In the last video I talked about making the keys out of plastic. So what you can very well do, you can use some half round styrene. So there's my keys. It's going to be perfect. So I'm using pointy tweezers here, and it wants to not sit on its bottom there. So it's basically how the keys are going to work. They go there, and then now I don't need to put the shoulder pad on at this moment, but I do need to place the wax block in its position. So what I normally like to do is I like to line it up evenly and then mark it with a pencil, so I know exactly where it's going to sit. This is not the squarest wax block. I didn't have my shaping tool to make it more square, but this is going to be the best I got. So basically what I can do is I can rough up this little section here. I could put a dab of super glue on here and glue it down, but if I do that, I get a rough spot in the mold. Other than that, I can heat the back of this up and make the wax soft and then stick it down. So what I can do is I can like take my tweezers, stick it in there, heat the back of that up, and then place it where I want it to be placed. And then once the wax cools, I'll be able to get my tweezers out. So I'm going to come back, let this dry, and then I'll come back and show you sticking the wax down, because I have to get out my torch to heat up my tools. So I'll be back in a bit, guys. Okay, I just want to pop back in here. We're making this styrene mold. I am waiting on a tool to melt some wax, so I'm going to move on to a different type of mold you can make from this 30-second plexiglass. I use this for cheap picture frames and things like that. It's clear, it's got a protective film over it, but you can make molds out of this and some Scotch tape. So I'm going to show you that technique. You just take your ruler, and this ruler happens to be the width of the walls of my mold that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to line this up on this straight edge here, like this. I'm going to take my sharp knife. I'm going to score this like this. Now, when you're doing styrene, you just need to score it a little bit. With plexiglass, you're going to want to score it a little bit more than you would styrene. So, be very careful working with a scalpel. So I got that scored. I'm going to come in with my scribing tool now. I'm going to use my scribing tool to deepen the cut. You should always use a sacrificial cutting mat when using a scribing tool, because when the point releases, it digs into your mat and it causes some issues. Now this is the trumpeter scribing tool. And after I do a couple passes with that, I like to use the Tamiya scribing tool. It's a little bit wider and it does a better job on the plexiglass. Plexiglass doesn't shear as smoothly as styrene does. So, alright, when you got it cut through there, you just take it and you snap it off. And I'm leaving the protective film on. So now that I got it cut in half, I'm just going to come back here with my knife, cut through that protective film, just like that. I haven't cut through that protective film all the way yet. There we go. Now I cut through it. So now I have a even piece of Lexan or plexiglass, however you want to call it. I'll take off this protective film now. Now, what you're going to want to do now is we're going to make cuts to make little box walls in this. So this is already the perfect height. It's got a lip on it. So I want to scrape that lip off here. I don't want that lip on there. You don't want to mar up the Lexan. You want to keep that glass-like edge on it. You know, this shiny edge coat, but just a little bit of sandpaper just to smooth out the edges isn't going to hurt anything. In fact, I'll take some of this grit here and just chop down that edge there. Just going to knock down this edge. A lip on it. Alright. Now take that big sheet and get that out of here. Now we have our sheet here. Now how do we want to proceed? So I want a 20 centimeters, I can get 2 5s and 2 3s for sure. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to use the lines on my cutting mat to help me. I'll line it here like this, and then I'm going to take my ruler. That up with the cutting mat lines. Now see, I can bend that without it totally cutting or breaking, and that's a good thing. See how I did that? So now I can reinforce that. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make a 3 centimeter cut to make my other wall. Do 5 centimeters again. I'm not going super hard on the first pass because I don't want my knife to walk. And I probably could use to change the blade in this scalpel, which I will do in the break. So, and then I'm going to do 3 centimeters now. So, and this one I want to cut all the way off, so, because this is our box. And this is a quicker temporary shell that you can just use really quickly. So so now we're gonna bend this and this, and we have this, and now we have us a box. So we have us a box here, and then you can take this and you can hot glue it to another cube of another sheet of Lexan. You could even hot glue it to just this piece of Lexan that you have left over, like this. Make sure it's square. You reinforce these edges with some Scotch tape. Just reinforce those edges, and then hot glue around it. Hot glue up all the corners. and then you have a nice mold for pouring some silicone in. So that is a way to make a mold out of this Lexan or plexiglass, however you want to call it. It makes a quick mold, and then when you demold it, if it's a tight mold, you just cut down the corners and pull off the tape. The tape will pull off really easily, and you will have yourself a mold that is ready to have some stuff poured into it. You can even push in some putties or things like that, you know, whatever you need, and I'll show more of that later in the video. So we're back on our clear plexiglass Lexan box. I got our little piece here. I cut out a base, just cut it out, I believe it's 5 by 7, so it has like a centimeter on each side. I'm going to seal up our end here with some clear tape. I want to make sure it's nice and square on there. Put this like that. Get that sealed in there, and then I'm going to put this on my mat, and I'm going to put it on the lines, and I'm going to tack it with my glue gun here. Just get a nice bead of glue on there. Let that bead of glue dry. You don't want any of the resin leaking out underneath of it. And this will peel off of this Lexan pretty good. You can use a craft glue gun. This is one I got on Amazon. It was cheap, and now I'm also going to pick this up here, and I'm going to do these corners so they don't come out. Heat up, put some glue on those corners, twist the gun to get the strings out. Could have reinforced them with some tape, but I find the glue works just fine. Then I'll do this tape joint here. And make sure you don't get any glue inside the mold. If you got any strings or anything, you can. And it's nice to have a glue gun with an on-off switch, so you can turn it off. Now let's come in here and take a look at what we got. So still a little sticky. We're going to let that cool down, and we will have a clear mold box that can be broken down. We can just peel that hot glue off. We put a little alcohol on the glue, and it will loosen it up. It will come right off. Then we'll just cut that tape slit, and then we can peel our mold right off. We could reuse it again, or it's just a temporary mold that doesn't cost very much at all. So you can use that for pouring silicone. You can use that for pushing in your silicone putty. Be a little careful that you don't dislodge the glue. You might want to put another bead around it, or some clay. Pack some clay around it so that when you push down, it doesn't flex the sides out and make a weird shaping mold. But if you use like the amazing mold putty super mold, it's pretty soft, so it'll reshape to the box after you push it in there. Now if you're using putty, I recommend, like I did in my first mold, the main mold video was on, to drill some holes in the bottom and raise it off the ground, so when you push it in, you can push out all the air bubbles and get a bubble-free cast. Because if you don't do that, I'll show you what happens. And I showed this earlier, but if you don't get all the air out, you get air bubbles in your putty, and that's not good. See the air bubbles in that putty there. Even under my keys, and there was none on the surface of the actual part I was molding, so I didn't remake the mold, but it would be nice to remake this bubble free. So what I'll do with this box mold that I make the second mold on, I will drill some holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe drill a hole in the bottom of each key, so when I push it down, all the air has room to escape. You could even drill a hole in the center of your mold part here, and then just worry about cleaning that up a little bit. When your part is cast, it'll have a little divot in there, and you just sand that off if it's not real intricate, like on this eagle. It's not too crazy, so you could easily do that. So that is that. This is dry, so now this is good to be used to mold either liquid silicone. This makes great for liquid silicone, like a pourable silicone. If you get a very low viscosity pourable silicone, you can pour it and keep it so the stream is thin enough to where it pops most of the air bubbles on its own. And you can glue down your wax tree. You can glue that down with some super glue and put some wax or some either melt some wax around it to seal it to the base here, or you can do some clay around it so the silicone won't leak underneath. Or if it does, when you pull it up, it'll pop up, and then you could just trim around the silicone with a razor blade. Ideally, you want your little wax square like this, all the edges to be square and flat on the bottom. I'm working on getting a wax file so I can do that. So that is this here. So that is the clear mold. We'll visit pouring something in that in another episode. And when we come back, we'll be working back on our permanent mold box, like this one that I constructed that I didn't show the video on. So we'll be making a different mold box. This is just a quick and dirty mold box that can be easily peeled apart. So be back in a bit. Okay, we're back on the polystyrene permanent mold, and I have my little wax block here that is pretty much reusable, and I'm going to attempt to stick this in here. Normally you'd want an alcohol flame to warm this up so you could stick it down in the middle, but I am going to use a blowtorch. I'm going to turn it all the way down. Stick it down in there, hold it there, and remove. And it didn't stick. Of course it didn't. This would be better with the alcohol flame. There we go. It's a little squishier there. Might have to rough up the bottom of the surface, but that's fine. That'll just make it a better key part. We can come back and carve this lip that's in there. There's a lip that happened around here. Heating it up that much with the torch is going to wear out the block, so it's not going to become as usable. But now that we have that, now we can use this wax base to heat up our whatever part we want to mold, and we're going to mold a different shoulder pad. We can heat this up, and embed that shoulder pad onto it and clean it up. You can also use some clay to do that. I have some oil-based plasticina that doesn't dry out. You want to refrain from a water-based or a sulfur-based clay. You want a sulfur-free clay. And then we also need to put in our wax keys here. Let's get our wax keys out of my little dish. Now these are going to be a little bit different to put in because I don't have... Yep, see, that came free. So I'm going to have to rough up the bottom of this surface to give it traction. So we're going to have to rough that up with probably some, I would recommend some 80 grit sandpaper just to rough where the wax is going to sit to give it something for the wax to embed into. You can also in turn use hot glue to stick it down, but as you can see, the wax would have worked if I moved quicker and I didn't bump it and things like that. So I'm going to rough this surface up and then it'll stick better, and I'll be back. Okay, we are back. I have roughed this up with 60 grit sandpaper in there, and I got this wax now stuck down. I think it doesn't help that my house is cool, so it's a little rough around the edges. I have an alcohol lamp coming that I can heat up my tools in and smooth it out, which I will do in the future. It won't be here for a couple days, so I have to wait on that. And I changed my mind about the keys. I'm not going to use these half round wax pieces because I want this to be a reusable mold. So what I'm going to be using is this styrene here. It is 4.6 millimeters by 3.27 millimeters. So I'm going to use this strip styrene, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sandpaper and I'm going to knock down the top corners of it a little bit so there's no undercuts, because that's the worst thing you can have in a mold is undercuts. So I'm just going to knock down that right there, blow it off. There we go. I'm going to put this in there, just like so. And I'm going to use some Tamiya Extra Thin to just glue this in place here. Just get that glued in there. Take this other one, do the same thing. I'm just knocking this down with some sandpaper. I believe this is 60 grit. So I'm going to put this in there also. Try to center it up the best I can. Now, the last one I made with little triangular keys, but this will work with these square keys also. And this will give you a reusable mold. All you need to do is replace the wax block and the piece you are molding, and preferably center it better than I did, but it will still make a good mold. So they are down there, they are sealed, no silicone will get under them. And now what I need to do is I need to drill a hole here, 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 and here along the edge, and that will allow air to escape as I push in the silicone putty or the Magoo blue stuff, whatever you want to do to heat this up. So I'm going to show heating this up and things like that later in this episode, but this is basic line for it. And then I am going to add this piece here as a brace on the bottom. But before I do that, I'm going to make my marks for my holes. And basically I'm just going to make a line across each, like I'm going to make, you know, a line with a dividing compass that goes all the way around the box. Then I'll mark my holes and I'll use the drill press to drill the holes in the box. And then we'll put our bottom braces on like I did in this one, and we will have a mold ready to mold. So I'll be back when I have that stuff ready, and I'll show you how I get that done. Okay, we're back to our making a reusable block mold. That's going to be for 2-piece molding. Like I said, I got my wax in there. I'm going to finish that up another time. I want to talk about the holes I'm going to drill. You see those pencil dots? That's roughly where I want the holes to be. So what I did was, on the back, I took my dividing compass, which is fantastic for making molds and working with wax. You set it to the distance you want, and then you can scribe a line. So what I done is I scribed a line that goes like this, evenly all the way around, and that's the line I want to put my holes on. I want one in the center here, so I'm going to take my ruler here, and I'm going to so 12 would be, so half of that would be 16 plus 6 would be 20. No, 16 plus 6 is 22, so right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on my line here. I'm going to go to 22. I'm going to mark B with a center punch where I want that for that hole there. I'm going to do the same thing over there. Go on this line. Mark that like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make that hole a little bit bigger with my triangle awl here, or my triangular scraper, so my drill bit can get in there better. Now what you can do is you can, if you want, you can take your dividing compass, and I'll show you how to use this. You can get your estimate of roughly where you want your hole, and you can go like that. Make your mark in your plastic. You have your little X where you want to put your center punch at for drilling your holes. Now, I want to put 1 millimeter holes in here, because it will allow the air to escape, but it won't make a large key in the mold, and we can just slice those off for the next, after we do the first half of the mold. So there we go. I got my 4 holes in there. I'm working with the pencil so you can see them. So you can see the 4 holes there. I'm going to drill those with the Proxxon drill press. I showed that in a previous video, so I'm not going to show that again, but I'm going to drill those holes out. Then I'm going to finish up the bottom of this, and I'm going to put my riser plates on here, and then I'll come back and show that. So, back. Hey guys, I lied. I'm going to drill it with my Dremel Micro, so show you a different way to drill it out. I didn't want to break out the Proxxon for a couple holes. So I showed you the Proxxon using a drill press for it. Now I'm going to show you this little Dremel Micro. Use any size Dremel. I got a keyless chuck on there. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to go real slow at 5,000. And I'm just going to come in here and hopefully you can see this. Try to make it so you can see it. Just gonna come in here and drill these out. And you can use a Dremel with a flex shaft. You can use, a lot of different rotary tools for this, but it's quicker than getting out the Proxxon. I'm just gonna hit these with my little micro countersink here, just to take off the rough edges on both sides. So we have our holes in there. So now when we press in the moldable plastic or the silicone rubber, whatever we want to mold in there that's a putty, all the air will push out of those holes. You can also, if you end up molding it and you get a lot of air around these keys, you can also drill a hole in the center of the keys. I don't feel that this is necessary, but we'll find out when we cast the mold in our moldable plastic or moldable reusable mold stuff that I talked about in a different video where I showed how it worked. So now I'm going to clean up the bottom of this. I'm going to put on some legs just like this, so it will stand up and it will be firmly supported. I'm going to put different legs on there. So I'm going to get the legs, I'm going to get this bottom cleaned up, nice and clean, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to glue this up, and I'll show you a cool way to cut these legs up and place them on there without having to go through a lot of work. So hold on, guys. Okay, I got my bottom all cleaned up. I got my first piece cut. It's got a little hang off, and I'll round those out. I'm going to take my Tamiya quick set and I'm going to line up this corner here like so. Both corners, hopefully. And I'm going to put me a little bit of the quick set one side. Make sure I'm still center. I'm off a little bit, so I'll move it over. I'll come along the other side here. Put my quick setting. And I got a little bit of a gap right here, just a smidge of a gap. And what I do for those gaps is I use this Sprue Go here. This is a very thin Sprue Goo. This is made with Tamiya quick set. This is not made with Tamiya extra thin. I don't know if it makes a difference, but makes me feel like it does, so just gonna fill that in there. It's gonna get sanded back, so if it's a little thick, that's fine. Go ahead and put a little bit in this corner here. Be careful you don't get it in your holes that you drilled. I like to use the plastic because the Sprue Goo, because it's plastic, it sands, and I don't have any bonding issues. I can add glue to it and it'll stick and all that good stuff. So we're gonna let this dry, and then I will come back and we'll add the other two support legs. Now, probably should have mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier because this video is taking like 5 days. This is 3.2 millimeter by 4.7 millimeters, so 200 thou by 150 thou. So there you go. That's what I'm using for this base. It worked great on my other base of the mold. So that's how that's going to look. It's going to look just like that, but it's going to be built for you on camera. So, be back. Okay guys, let's talk about these last two pieces. What I'm going to do here is, I'm not going to put them in the middle because it's going to cover up some holes. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put them off like this for the legs, and then I'm going to line it up square on the back here, like so, and then I'm going to mark that spot there, and I'm going to mark that, and then I'm going to use this other side, and I'm going to come in here like this. I'm going to square that up because that's a square cut. This one right there like that. I'll come in here, that, and then I'm going to take my the chopper. This is just a little tool here that has a razor blade on it, and I will line up my, square it up to the back fence there. I will cut off that one. This will give me a nice square cut. Cut off that one. Put the chopper up. That is a fantastic tool if you scratch build or do anything like that. Now, this on there like that, line up that corner, and I'm going to add my extra thin like so, put a little bit in this joint right there, make sure I'm still lined up. Add that one. That one's on there. I'm going to put this one on now. So get this on there like that. And then glue that, and then I'm going to fill these corners again with my Sprue Goo. It's just a little bit of a low spot from when I sanded it. I want that to be sealed up. So then clean most of that up. Get a little bit in there. Reinforce that corner. So that is all set. We have our legs on there, and then we'll come back with I'll come back with a 100 grit sanding stick by Infini Models. back talking about Infini Models. Make a great product. I'm going to use this 100 grit to sand that back. You can also use, this is a 100 grit from Stevens International. You can use that. So I'm going to get that sanded back. I might use my Proxxon disc sander. So I'll see how this dries up. I might use my Proxxon disc sander to show you how that works. Show you a range of different tools for working with styrene when making mold boxes. So I'm going to let that dry up, and then we are going to move on to the next item of this box. Alright, I got my Proxxon disc sander out. I got a 240 grit on there. I just want to square up the fence here. So I just want to make sure the fence is square, up and down like that, and we can turn it on. It's going to be a little loud, and I can come in here and sand off the ends here. And I was able to sand those down pretty good with the Proxxon disc sander. It did leave a little bit of burrs. I'll touch that up with some sanding sticks and we'll be good to go. I got a little bit more to go right there. There we go. So that is that. That is a cool little tool I have. I like it. I use it for cleaning up my resin parts. It works great for that. You can just put on different grits and things like that. So that is the Proxxon sander, cleaning up those ends. And I'm going to come in here with my Infini Model zebra sticks. My 220 here. Sand this up like this. Those corners a little bit. Could have rounded them on the sander, but nothing around them on here. I prefer hand sanding more anyways, but it was just a quick way to take that down. Come in here with my 400. These sharp points and have a mold that's not very rough. It's nice. Nice smooth mold. So now we have feet. When we push down in there, all the air will escape and we'll be good to go. Okay guys, that's gonna do it for this video on making a reusable mold box for your silicone putties or your blue stuff, your reusable mold molding materials. Check out my video on that, and this is going to do it. I got my little wax runner block there. I'll clean that up with some tools and a wax tool heated up on an alcohol lamp, and then I'll be able to just sit my shoulder pad or whatever small piece I want to form. I can make my first mold, and then I can let that cure, and I can make my mold box to actually cast the second half and all the parts in. It's nice and smooth. No way to cut your fingers, plenty of room to push it down and let all the air out. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you so much, and check out me on these social media links. You can also support me on Patreon to help further my channel and allow me to do cool tutorials and more stuff like this. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic day.